Welcome, my dear friends. It is jolly to see you. In case we haven't met, I'm Stephen Clements, a writer, a gamer, and an appreciator of big brain activities in general. On this channel, I perform dramatic story readings, I provide role-playing game reviews, and I get to interview interesting people. This Christmas season, boy do I have a salacious bit of story for you. Our dear friend Christopher Clark, who I previously interviewed on this channel, wrote the short story Vixen under the pen name Hugh Betcha. What he calls a lampoon of tawdry Harlequin romance novels centered around Santa's reindeer, I call it what happens when reindeer get their own Jerry Springer episode. Vixen, the Untold Story. The true untold story of a beautiful young transvestite reindeer driven mad by desire. When I asked him, is this furry porn? He assured me it was not. Otherwise, I wouldn't be doing this, because furries are an abomination before the Lord and deserve only to be cleansed with sword and torch. With that out of the way, settle in with the strongest beverage you can handle, because in this part 1 of 2 episodes, we're about to get trashy. Vixen by Hugh Betcha. Dedication to the long-suffering elf Bernard, who told me this story after I got him totally ripped and then bribed him with a pack of Camel no-filters. Prologue.
Daddy, why aren't there 9 reindeer on Santa's sleigh team? Shouldn't there have been 9 once they added Rudolph? And why are all the reindeer given boy names except Vixen?
The father looked perplexed, almost pained. He had been dreading this day, but knew that it would come eventually. It was inevitable, a passage to manhood. Well, son, I guess you're old enough to hear this story now. But don't tell your friends. That's a job for their mommies and daddies when they feel their kids are old enough. The father placed a comforting arm around his son's shoulders and guided him gently towards the study, grabbing himself a hefty snifter of brandy along the way. He seated his son near the fire and closed and locked the door to the study to ensure they would be neither disturbed nor overheard. He stared intently into the face of his son and prepared to begin. This was not going to be easy. Chapter 1. It was a beautiful day. The sun, a small yellow disk, added just the warmth required. Pine and fir trees shone greenly, bristling with balsam-scented life. The snow was deep, not so deep as to make walking difficult, but more than enough to blanket the ground in a coverlet of sparkling white, muffling sounds and brightening the world with its splendor. It was a magical winter day, and not far off, in a meadow clearing, a group of young reindeer frolicked. Joanne was an attractive young fawn, big for her age, but already showing signs of the voluptuous doe she would one day become. Her neck was already assuming a graceful arc. Her chest was deep and full, and her rump already rounding in that fashion found so enticing by the young bucks. Her coat had developed a deep chestnut brown color, and it moved in waves of softness whenever a light breeze blew. Her femininity was marred by but a single flaw. She was a tombuck.
Come on, Paul,
She shouted to a nearby fawn.
let's butt heads.
But you're a doe, the fawn complained in reply. Does don't butt heads.
Next thing you know, she'll be growing antlers.
Teased another from nearby.
Let's stop all this kid stuff,
Answered a third, apparently embarrassed by the juvenile attitudes of the others.
Santa's tryouts are in just 4 weeks, and we all want to be ready. Let's practice some takeoffs and landings.
The group moved further towards the middle of the field, leaving Joanne alone at the edge of the pine forest. Knowing that she would be shunned, she left the bucks to their practice, loping gently over the snow to a smaller clearing, hidden in the midst of the wood. Once there, she began her own practice, taking off, landing quickly but gently, and pirouetting gracefully in the air. She was depressed that the bucks treated her differently, but strangely excited by the attention that it brought her. And the words of the young buck had put the germ of an idea in the back of her mind. A sudden gust of wind caused her to lose control, and with a rather clumsy correction, she crashed unceremoniously to the ground near the branches of a dead tree. The tree was an outcast, much the same as she. It was forgotten by its fellows, and lay as a tangle of branches, looking like nothing so much as a twisted pile of antlers. Her germ of an idea became a fully fledged disease. A large man sat before the assembled reindeer, resplendent in his red velvet and white ermine costume. His bearing was regal, commanding the respect of all. At a time appointed by only he knew who, he rose to his feet, commanding their immediate attention. Smiling, the man addressed the hopeful throng. "The tradition of Santa's sleigh and his flying reindeer is both old and time-honored. Only the best and most skilled reindeer will make the team. I am honored that you have all come today in hopes of making that team. But some of you will be disappointed. Do not take this as a personal slight, but instead use it as an incentive to redouble your efforts at perfecting your skills. Ours is a sacred trust, and it is a great honor to make the team. But enough of the mundanities of our mission as the bringers of gifts. It is time to show your mettle. Form 2 columns in the field and prepare for my commands. Do your best at each test, and good luck to you all. First one, let's go ho-ho!" A young chestnut-colored buck stood forward.
"My name is Lester,"
he said, trying to hide his trepidation.
"Dash away!"
hollered Santa. Lester took 2 steps and leapt into the air. It was a perfect takeoff, worthy of a member of Santa's famous team. He turned gracefully in the air and flew near to Santa.
"Land!"
commanded Santa. Lester came in low and fast, breaking into a run with practiced ease as his hooves touched the ground, slowing to a stop about 30 feet away. Hopefully, he gazed toward Santa for approval.
"Not bad, son, but you need to stop more quickly than that. Most roofs aren't quite that long. Next!"
And so the morning wore away, gradually becoming afternoon, as the young reindeer all displayed their skills for a watchful Santa. There were mistakes and wonders, crashes and recoveries, hopes birthed and hopes dashed. Soon only 3 reindeer remained. Santa looked forward to the end of a busy day. As he prepared to call for the next reindeer, the ritual was suddenly interrupted. A young buck, not previously seen at the reindeer tryouts, approached Santa and bent a knee in supplication. He was a large buck, obviously young, but with a well-developed set of antlers already gracing his forehead. Lifting his head slightly, he addressed Santa.
"Sir, I know I'm late, but could I please be given a chance as well?"
"Well, you know, I'll brook no tardiness at Christmas time,"
began Santa.
"but the tryouts are not yet complete, so you may certainly enter. Just wait over there with the other 3.
Overjoyed, the young buck sprang to his hooves, trotting happily towards the other 3 reindeer. Strangely, as he surveyed his comrades, he dropped his head slightly, almost as though he was hiding something from his ad hoc companions. He then sedately assumed his place in the line.
"Next!"
hollered Santa.
"I am Thomas,"
replied the reindeer that was first in line. Thomas did well, if not spectacularly, as did George, who followed him. As George came in for his final landing, the third of the 3 reindeer addressed the latecomer. "Hi, my name is Paul. You're quite handsome, almost beautiful for a buck. I'll bet you're a shoo-in for Santa's team."
"Next!"
came the command from Santa, cutting off any opportunity for the new buck to respond. "See you afterwards," said Paul, the excitement plain in his voice. "It's my turn now." The young buck watched Paul intently as Santa put him through his paces. He was a soul of grace, swooping, diving, turning, and stopping on a dime — Santa had one handy — and exhibiting powerful takeoffs. If anyone was a shoo-in for Santa's team, it was Paul. The newcomer's reverie was suddenly broken.
"Next!"
hollered Santa. This was it. The young buck took off on command, showing brute power, if not grace, and was able to turn and dive better than many that had competed that day. He did seem a bit troubled by the weight of his magnificent antlers, but was otherwise a superb performer. He came in to land near Santa, executing a perfect 4-point landing, the only one of the day. Although his hooves were buried more deeply in the snow than might have been proper, Santa was visibly impressed.
"What did you say your name was, son?"
asked the jolly old elf.
Now don't be nervous,"
comforted Santa.
"It's Joe,"
came the eventual reply.
Go over and stand with the others, Joe,
said Santa with a bright smile.
Assembled bucks, the time has come,
announced Santa.
I would like to thank you all for doing your best and to encourage you to try again next year if you don't make the team this time.
Santa paused for a moment, smiling broadly at the expectant young reindeer.
I would like the following bucks to step forward and receive their new reindeer names. Stephen, you shall now be called Dasher. Bruce, you shall now be called Dancer. Paul, you shall now be called Prancer. Derek, you shall now be known as Comet. Gary, you shall now be called Cupid. Adolf, you shall now be called Dunder. Hans, you shall be called Blitzen.
The remaining reindeer held their breath as Santa prepared to announce the final name.
And our astonishing latecomer will finish out this year's team. Joe, you shall now be called Vixen.
The 8 chosen reindeer all shouted with jubilation, congratulating each other and remembering after only a slight delay to console those of their friends that were not chosen. Soon, a full-scale celebration was in progress, with even the losers joining in the festivities. At a signal from Santa, several dwarves strode forward with platters of cookies and cakes, and plenty of cider and sweet bran mash for all. Then the dwarves and Santa left the reindeer to their carousing. The food and drink was consumed heartily by all, and soon many of the young bucks had enjoyed a bit more sweet bran mash than was good for them. Vixen, especially, was feeling a bit euphoric. Prancer, previously known as Paul, was also obviously under the influence as he stumbled towards Vixen.
I wanted to say that I thought you were terrific,
he slurred.
How come I never saw you at practice?
Ignoring the question, Vixen replied with one of his own.
So is Prancer just a name, or can you dance?
Let me show you, began Prancer. He didn't care if this was a buck. He was attracted to this reindeer.
Not here, interrupted Vixen. I know a quieter place.
Curious, Prancer followed Vixen as he led the way into the forest. The mysterious buck traveled by several circuitous paths, eventually arriving at a smaller clearing in the heart of the woods. He then turned to face Prancer.
Are you sure you don't remember me?
Vixen asked. Startled, Prancer studied the face of the young buck intently. There was something familiar about him, but Prancer simply could not remember where he'd seen him before. Vixen gave him no opportunity to reply, however.
I thought you were cute since the first time I saw you at the practice field.
Vixen lowered her head and removed the antlers from it deftly with a hoof. She was now plainly all dough.
And I've wanted to do this since then as well.
She moved forward, gently licking Prancer's face, working her way towards his full buck lips until she was able to slide her tongue into his mouth. Probing deeply, she received an ardent response from Prancer, who was too caught up in the moment to resist. Finally, they ended their embrace, both now fully excited and breathing heavily. Joanne? He stammered between breaths. How?
Just shut up and kiss me, you rotten buck.
She breathed at him again, covering his mouth with her own. They fell to the snow, kissing passionately, exploring each other's bodies with their hoofs. They were passionate, but young, and their congress was completed quickly thereafter. Vixen was the first to rise from the snow.
You really are Prancer, aren't you?
She teased. Just come over here and you'll find out, answered Prancer huskily. Chapter 2. Vixen was both sad and confused. It had been several days since her encounter with Prancer in the clearing, and Prancer seemed to be avoiding her. Her suggestive hellos at reindeer practice were answered only with formal nods from Prancer, and he always seemed to find an excuse not to be alone with her. Back in the forest, away from formal practice, it was just as bad. Her disguise discarded, her antlers removed, Vixen would venture a friendly hello or a smile at the young buck. Prancer would ignore these overtures and would actually take flight if she attempted to talk to him. Hurt and confused, Vixen made up her mind. She would find out what was wrong with the buck. The passion they had shared could not simply evaporate overnight. Resolute, Vixen decided to visit Prancer at the home of his parents. Sorrowfully, she approached the front of their cave and politely snorted, requesting entrance to the cave. Prancer's father soon appeared at the cave's mouth.
Yes, young doe, how may I help you?
He asked in a pleasant but authoritative manner.
I was hoping to talk to Prancer, Vixen replied. Is he home?
Prancer's father was an old-fashioned sort of reindeer and had warned Prancer that now that he had made Santa's team, every doe for miles around would be doing her best to become his mate. This pretty young thing was obviously one such predator.
Might I say who's calling?
He inquired politely.
Yes,
Vixen replied in nervous determination.
Tell him it's Joanne.
Prancer's father nodded curtly, and then walked slowly back through the cave, gathering his thoughts. Coming to what he believed was an inescapable conclusion, he decided to have one final word with the young buck before announcing the young doe.
Son, he began, there is a young doe here to see you, one I've never met before. Now, as we have discussed, it is okay to entertain these young ones, but be careful about—
Yes, Dad, I know, interrupted Prancer, a bit grumpily. No mating.
That's right, son. I'm sorry to be such a curmudgeon, but it's for your own good. You're on Santa's team now, and you need to choose a mate that will ensure your status with the team.
Yes, Father, came the dejected reply.
All right. Now etiquette demands that you go and speak with the young doe.
Okay, Dad, replied Prancer. Prancer's father followed his young son to the door of the cave at a respectful distance. Hi, Joanne, greeted Prancer.
It's good to see you,
answered Vixen sulkily. Ixnay on the you say, muttered Prancer. He then continued in a lowered voice. I can't talk right now. Meet me at the special practice field at midnight.
Okay, whispered Vixen,
brightening visibly.
I see you're busy, so I won't stay, she said aloud. I just wanted to stop by and say hi.
Well, answered Prancer magnanimously, it was great meeting you. Vixen gave Prancer a somewhat mystified look and took flight, returning to her family's cave. Vixen hurried home. Midnight would come all too soon, and she had to be prepared. Eagerly anticipating the evening's rendezvous, Vixen bathed in a nearby stream and applied her most expensive attraction scent. Knowing Prancer's ardor for Santa's team, she also donned a scanty harness that revealed far more than it concealed. A light lip gloss and Santa's suit red, and she was ready. This would be a night Prancer would not soon forget. Vixen could already feel the warmth and excitement rising deep within her abdomen as she headed for the midnight meeting. She arrived at the field just before midnight, cleaning the area of stray pine cones and straightening the snow. She had just finished her preparations when Prancer appeared at the edge of the field. He was an amazing example of young buckhood, his powerful chest rippling in the moonlight, his haunches glistening in the reflected light of the snow. Vixen could resist him no longer. She lunged forward and thrust her tongue deeply into his mouth. Prancer responded ardently, and then surprisingly thrust her away.
Vixen,
we had to talk, he stammered.
Later,
she replied, kissing him in an area she was sure would forestall further commentary. His response was immediate and dramatic, and they were soon intertwined amidst the snow. They coupled long and lustily, stopping only when both were near exhaustion. Vixen rolled on her side and lit a pine cone for each of them. She sucked hungrily at her cone, exhaled, and then batting her eyes at Prancer, intoned seductively, So, talk. Vixen, began Prancer slowly. I don't think we can see each other anymore. Prancer hurriedly grabbed Vixen as she attempted to rise, startled. He held her close, doing his best to comfort her. You don't understand. The rest of the team thinks you're a buck and would think that I am, well, a bit strange. My father has a number of does that he wants me to meet, and he plans to pick one of station for me to marry. It just wouldn't be right for us to keep seeing each other, with both of us being on Santa's team. I do care for you, but it just wasn't meant to be.
You can just throw what we have away,
interrupted Vixen, complaining bitterly.
We could meet in private until the world was ready for our secret. Don't tell me that our love means nothing to you.
I'm not sure this is love, Vixen, stammered Prancer, unsure of his emotions. Vixen could take no more. Gathering the soiled harness, the one she had worn especially for him, she flew from the clearing. She fled deep into the woods, sobbing, clutching her harness for comfort, cried herself to sleep. Prancer walked slowly home, his head drooping, not understanding Vixen's reaction. Did she think that the rest of Santa's team would meekly accept her as a doe? Did she plan on allowing them to believe that the two of them were homosexuals? Santa wouldn't stand for gay reindeer on his team, Prancer knew. Confused and unsure of what he should perhaps have done, Prancer was soon at home. As he walked through the entrance to his cave, however, he was in for another surprise. Chapter 3.
Prancer!
The sudden illumination provided by the glaring Christmas lights within the cave, now all glowing, should have alerted Prancer to the surprise that awaited him, but he was lost in his own thoughts. He realized his mistake somewhat forcefully. Only a brief moment later, there was no mistaking the angry voice of his father.
Have you any idea what time it is? And you, with practice tomorrow, you stumble in at all hours of the night smelling of dough? Mister, I won't stand for this.
His head still filled with guilt and confusion over Vixen's actions that evening, Prancer was caught completely unprepared for his father's wrath. But, Dad, stammered Prancer finally, hoping to find a middle ground.
Enough,
intoned his father, with a note of infinite authority.
As of tomorrow, you'll be seeing the does that I have lined up for you, and none others. If you don't like it, well, you can just find a cave of your own. Is that clear?
Prancer thought briefly, but could find no alternative.
Yes, sir.
Father, he finally squeaked out.
Now get to bed, and remember, you're on thin ice, mister,
his father commanded, with a note of finality. Prancer had no choice but to head meekly to his room, the cave. Weeks passed, with Prancer becoming steadily more depressed. He hadn't known it before, but he had true and deep feelings for the doe known as Vixen. He had not, however, dared to violate his father's edict. He saw Vixen at reindeer practice, but she purposely avoided him and would speak not a word to him directly. It was just after one such depressing episode that he returned home in the late afternoon. As he entered the cave, however, he found that his troubles for the day were far from through.
Prancer, my son, come in, beamed his father. There's someone I'd like you to meet.
The elder reindeer indicated a young doe standing coquettishly in the corner.
This is Donder's sister, from a fine, upstanding family of team reindeer. Her father and brother have graciously given their consent to allow you to show her the woods this evening. What do you say?
This was all he needed after the rejection he had received from Vixen today. For him, at least so he thought, there were no other does, only Vixen. Prancer could barely see the young doe amidst his grief and surprise. Sensing his son's reply, Prancer's father hustled him quickly into the next room.
Now look, son, you've been moping around the cave for the last 4 weeks. I don't know what that little loose tail did to you, but it's time to snap out of it. I had to call in a lot of favors to get you this introduction, and I'll be damned if I'm going to let you blow it. Just take a good look at that sweet young thing in there. Have you lost your mind?
Prancer decided that he could at least look at the doe, even if all he saw was Vixen. What he saw broke his reverie. She was a petite thing, but marvelously proportioned. Her tail was fluffy and small, barely covering her, and her firm haunches seemed almost to beckon him. Her full and pouting lips seemed made for the act of love. Perhaps this wouldn't be so bad after all. Hesitantly, he strode forward. Hi, my name is Prancer, he managed to eke out.
Oh, how wonderful. You have a team name. My name is just plain old Rachel. I was hoping that you might have time, if you weren't already seeing some other doe, to show me the woods tonight and perhaps grab a bite at the meadow.
It was as though the storm clouds had receded and a ray of light had entered his very soul. Now excited, Prancer recovered quickly. Well, sure, and I'd be honored, he managed, his composure returning.
And we could talk about sleigh pulling too, if that's okay, added Rachel.
You're interested in sleigh pulling?"
said Prancer, brightening visibly. "Oh, yes," said Rachel, guiding him towards the door. "I hope that one day they allow does on the team, although I understand that they don't have the raw physical power of a handsome buck like you," she teased, guiding him toward the door. Prancer did not see the quick and somewhat knowing wink that the doe gave his father as they left the cave. The pair walked slowly through the woods, under a sparkling moon with brilliant stars. They talked for hours about sleigh pulling, training, harnesses, and diets. As the night wore on, they also discussed deeper issues, philosophy, the rearing of fawns, and their hopes and dreams for the future. Prancer felt as though he had known Rachel his entire life. They flew together, ate some scrumptious tree bark at the clearing, and played tag far into the evening. Then, without warning, Rachel stole a kiss from the young buck. She grinned elfishly, reindeer are not fond of sheep, at Prancer, and smiled a shy smile. "Perhaps you'd better take me home now," she suggested. Astonished, but not wishing to spoil this perfect evening, Prancer quickly agreed with a subdued nod. He walked the magnificent doe slowly home. He tried to dawdle as much as possible, but it seemed as though they arrived in mere moments. "When will I see you again?" he asked as she entered the cave. "How about tomorrow?" she replied, as a large buck hovered into view behind her. She quickly turned towards him and added, "It is okay, isn't it, Daddy?" "With Prancer?" asked her father facetiously, smiling broadly. "Sure, he's as fine a buck as they come. You come around here tomorrow, son, at dinner time. Meet the wife and family. We'll see you then." With a smile, the older buck ushered his daughter towards the back of their cave, smiled at the young buck, and gently closed the door of the cave. Prancer paused there just a moment, his head swimming, and then decided it was time. He made his way home. Prancer flew home on a cloud. What a great doe! She was funny, intelligent, and beautiful. He hated to admit it, but it looked as though for once his father had been right. Prancer thought he might be falling in love with the doe. A sudden and passionate kiss pressed firmly against his mouth, only heightening this feeling. It also broke his concentration. He glanced up, wondering how Rachel managed to escape her cave while under the watchful eyes of her father. It wasn't Rachel. It was Vixen. "Out kind of late, aren't you, Prancer?" she drawled seductively. With a start, Prancer realized that he had wandered back to their special clearing without realizing it. He composed himself quickly. "I wasn't out looking for you, if that's what you're thinking," he said a bit hastily. He didn't mean to be cruel, but the entire situation had caught him by surprise. He did not wish to hurt Vixen, but there was no turning back now. "I've met someone else." "Really?" Vixen teased. "That kiss seemed to say that you haven't forgotten me. Are you saying that you don't find me attractive anymore?" Vixen squatted on the ground with her rear haunches spread widely apart, leaving no mystery as to what she thought their next activity should entail. "Vixen, stop," stammered Prancer, confused. "You're very pretty, but I'm serious about this doe." He hesitated, afraid to hurt Vixen further. "I think she might be the one." Vixen's demeanor became suddenly hostile. "We'll see," she said as she took to the air in a huff. Prancer, now hurt, confused, and still warmed by the light of his new crush, was left at a loss. He watched as Vixen's form faded into the sky, unable to decide what his true feelings really were. He stayed there for minutes that seemed like hours, and then slowly made his way home. Now, wasn't that scandalous? I warned you. If you want to skip ahead and read the whole thing for yourself, Vixen is available as a PDF on DriveThruRPG. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this train wreck, so please drop them in the comments below. If you enjoyed this sordid tale, I do enjoy it when people like and subscribe, so you know what to do. And I thank you for your time, and that you chose to spend it with me and Hugh Betcha. As we dear friends part for now, I wish you nothing but the best.